Well, welcome to 700 Club Israel. Today we celebrate a hero. This man risked his life, and in doing so, he saved hundreds of thousands of others. His name is Walter Rosenberg. He alerted the world to Hitler's death camps because he's one of the only few men to escape.
More than 1 million people passed through Auschwitz's gates. Most never came out. But one emaciated teenager did the impossible, fleeing Auschwitz with nothing more than a few smuggled documents. How did a Jewish prisoner escape from the Nazis' most infamous death camp? Walter Rosenberg had never been one for following orders blindly. He was 17 when the Slovakian government ordered the Jewish community to prepare for deportation. But in his own words, naturally, it didn't come into my mind to obey such a stupid instruction. So he stripped off his yellow star and ran away to England. But he wasn't just looking for safety. He wanted to join the fight against the Nazis. He never made it there. Hungarian guards caught him at the border and beat him up for hours, convinced he was a spy. But they couldn't break him. So they sent him back over the border to a labor camp in Slovakia. Once again, he tried to escape. And once again, he was caught. This time, he was sent to the Majdanek concentration camp, which made all the previous horrors he'd suffered look like a day in the park. Anyone who moved too slowly was beaten. Anyone who talked back was shot. Starvation and disease ravaged the camp. The Nazis left the bodies stacked in a pile as a warning to all the other prisoners. This could be you. So when an officer asked for volunteers to do farm work outside of the camp, Walter jumped at the chance. Nothing and nowhere could be worse than Majdanek. Or so he thought. That's how he found himself packed into a cattle car, bursting to capacity. But even as he struggled just to breathe, he searched for a way out. Could he jump and make a break for it when the train stopped to refuel? But the SS warned that for every man who went missing, 10 more would be shot. After 2 excruciating days, the train stopped and the prisoners stumbled out. They had arrived at Auschwitz. This was the Nazis' largest death camp, where they perfected the art of mass murder. SS officers divided all the newcomers by sex. 1 line of men and boys, 1 line of women and girls. From there, they'd be divided again. Some were chosen for slave labor, or to be human guinea pigs for gruesome experiments. Most were herded into a communal area and stripped for a disinfecting shower. These showers lasted only a few minutes. At the end, the doors would open, revealing hundreds of dead bodies. They hadn't been disinfected, they'd been gassed to death. It became Walter's job to remove the dead and sort through their possessions. Mostly, he found exactly the kind of things you'd pack if you thought you were being relocated. Kitchen utensils, clothes for different seasons, snacks from home. The Nazis found a use for everything. Wedding rings, gold teeth, even hair. All was repurposed and sent back to Germany to fund the war effort. The gold was melted. The hair was turned into stuffing for mattresses, ropes for ships, even socks for submarine workers. Because the Nazis didn't see their victims as humans, but as things that could be mined for value and stripped for parts. The whole operation depended on keeping the victims clueless until they were locked into the gas chambers. Because if prisoners panicked, or worse, rebelled, they delayed the other transports and disrupt the entire operation. Walter knew that only one thing separated him from the other victims: luck. He was lucky that the guards had deemed him healthy and strong enough to work. But no one stayed healthy or strong at Auschwitz. And soon, he too would be sent to the gas chambers, taking everything he'd seen with him. But if he was sent to his death, who would warn Europe's remaining Jews? By the time the newcomers showed up at the camp, it was already too late. Anyone who tried to warn them would be dragged behind the wagon and shot. Walter may have been in hell, but now he had a mission. Something beyond mere survival. He'd tell the world what was happening. Europe's Jews truly didn't understand that relocation was a euphemism for certain death. But what if they knew? What if they understood that they weren't being given new lives in the East, new work assignments? What if someone told them where the trains were really going? They would have a fighting chance. They would be able to resist. But how could he bring news of this horror to the outside world? He turned the problem over and over in his mind, as he dragged bodies from the chambers, as he sorted through the possessions of people who had been alive only moments before, as he coughed and sputtered and eventually ended up in the camp's hospital with typhus. Most of the prisoners who went to the hospital never came out again, but Walter got lucky. because at the hospital, he encountered a member of the resistance who brought him medicine and helped nurse him back to health. Even in the worst conditions imaginable, prisoners had banded together, risking torture and death to resist their Nazi overlords. Now, Walter had joined their ranks. The resistance helped find him a job as a registrar, a prisoner who recorded the names and information of the victims who had been selected to live. He took careful notice of every detail. The layout and geography of the massive camp, the number of arrivals, where they came from, what they carried, how many were chosen to work, how many were murdered on sight. In 1944, he learned that a group of inmates were building a new railway line that would lead straight to the gas chambers. The old line couldn't handle all the incoming victims. And when a drunk SS guard laughed that soon they'd have Hungarian salami, Walter started putting the pieces together. The SS stole everything from the new arrivals. From the French Jews, it had been sardines. From the Greek Jews, it was halva and olives. From the Dutch Jews, it was cheese. Now the Nazis were joking about Hungarian salami, which meant that they were preparing for the murder of the Jews of Hungary. Walter had been contemplating his escape for 2 years. It was now or never. The fate of Hungary's Jews hung in the balance. But how do you escape from Auschwitz? How do you get past the constant surveillance? The barbed wire, the guns, the dogs? He'd already planned one escape along with another inmate in the camp, but his partner had tried to do it alone. The SS had shot him down and left his body on display for 2 days, seated in a stool in the middle of the camp. If Walter was really going to do this, he had to get it right. So he and a fellow inmate named Vrba-Wetzler began analyzing previous escape attempts. They paid close attention to what went wrong and strategized what they could do differently. They talked to other inmates. They studied the layout of the camps. They passed information secretly between members of the underground. And then they came up with a plan. Auschwitz was made up of both an inner camp where the prisoners slept and an outer perimeter where the prisoners did slave labor. There was no getting past the high-voltage barbed wire fences that surrounded the inner camp, but the outer perimeter was only guarded during the day while the prisoners were working. Walter and Alfred knew from previous escape attempts that the guards would spend only 3 days searching the outer ring before they gave up. If they could find a way to hide beneath the guards' feet for 3 days, they might have a chance at escape. Walter and Alfred were not religious. They didn't know that April 7th, 1944 was the first night of Passover, the holiday that celebrates the liberation of the ancient Israelites from slavery in Egypt. It wouldn't have mattered. There was no Seder in Auschwitz, no matzah, no Haggadah, no long festive meals filled with the questions of children. But without knowing it, Walter and Alfred were following in the footsteps of their ancestors. Like the ancient Israelites, they'd suffered for years. Like the ancient Israelites, they were pursued by an enemy who wanted nothing less than their total destruction. The pair hollowed out a spot within a woodpile inside the camp. As the guards left their posts, they slipped inside. They carried only the most essential supplies: 2 metal tubes stuffed with evidence of the Nazis' crimes, tobacco and gasoline to cloak their smell and confuse the dogs, a change of clothes and a heel of bread they'd stolen from the dead prisoners, and razor blades in case they were caught. Death was preferable to talking under torture and endangering the entire resistance. And then they waited 80 hours, 4,800 minutes, 288,000 seconds, as the guards' boots pounded above them, as the dogs panted and prowled. Side by side, Walter and Alfred lay still as death. The search stopped 3 days later, as they knew it would. They heard the guards pack up for the night, heard the inmates hurry back to the camp. Under the cover of darkness, they emerged. Their bodies dripped with gasoline, their legs were weak as jelly, but they made it out of the camp. Now, the real escape could begin. For 11 nights, they walked through enemy territory, nibbling bread they had taken from Auschwitz and drinking water from streams. When they finally crossed the Polish-Slovakian border, exhausted and weak, a contact helped them get in touch with the Slovak Jewish Council. Finally, they had made it. They had escaped, and they could warn the Hungarian Jewish community before it was too late. The Slovak Jewish Council was eager to hear from Walter and Alfred. They heard rumors about Auschwitz. They'd been waiting for 2 years for someone to confirm whether the rumors were true. Walter had wanted to keep his emotions in check, to give the council the cold, hard facts. But when he and Alfred sat down to tell their story, each question was more naive than the next. "Is it really so hard to get out of there?" the council asked. "How did you manage if it's so difficult? If it's really that bad, Why didn't the Red Cross intervene? Each answer brought all the horrors pouring back. Walter was 19. His entire family was dead. He had just escaped from hell after seeing more than any human could bear. And these people, they were so naive. They didn't understand anything he was saying. They couldn't. Still, Walter and Alfred gave their testimony, recounting horror after horror. And they had evidence, a label from a Zyklon B canister used in a gas chamber, data from a central registry. The council fell into a stunned silence, finally announcing they'd reconvene in 3 days. Walter nearly fell out of his chair. 3 days? 3 days meant thousands more people thrown into gas chambers. Didn't the council understand that they were all next? He had escaped Auschwitz to save his fellow Jews, and yet Jewish leaders were dragging their feet as people were being murdered and burned. The next day, Walter and Alfred dictated their report to a typist, sharing everything they had worked so hard to memorize about Auschwitz. The layout of the camp, maps of the gas chambers, descriptions of victims who had arrived, estimates of the transports, things they saw with their own eyes, and things they had learned from other prisoners. They estimated that the Nazis had murdered 1.75 million Jews at Auschwitz since June 1942. They dictated for 3 days until they were delirious, and then they edited and rewrote until they felt their report was as accurate as possible. Each of the report's 40-odd pages contained details and descriptions that only prisoners could have known, like the fact that the Nazis filled out discharge forms for prisoners who had been murdered, so that the death rate seemed much lower than they actually were. Walter and Alfred made secret copies and distributed them as widely as possible. The Slovakian Jewish Council gave the report to Rudolf Kastner, one of the heads of the Hungarian Jewish community. For safety, Walter took on a new identity with forged papers. From now on, he was Rudolf Vrba, a man with centuries of Aryan ancestry. Rudolf's new birthday was April 7th, the night Walter had begun his miraculous escape. He'd done it. He'd warned the Hungarian Jewish community in time to prevent the murder of another million Jews. Or so he thought. The Vrba-Wetzler report was published anonymously in Switzerland in May 1944. It wasn't long before headlines started appearing in international media. A month later, 2 more men managed to escape from Auschwitz. And what they reported turned Walter's stomach. 100,000 Hungarian Jews had already arrived at Auschwitz. None had survived. How could this be? Why hadn't Hungary's Jewish leaders publicized the report as soon as they received it? Walter knew who he blamed. Rudolf Kastner, head of the Hungarian Jewish community. At the time Walter had handed in the report, Kastner had already been negotiating with the Nazis to secure the safety of Hungarian Jews. But the negotiations fell through, and Kastner was only able to save 1,600, including himself and his family. Walter was sure that Kastner had put aside the report in order to avoid jeopardizing his negotiations with the SS. It was a grudge he'd hold for the rest of his life. Was it true? Did Kastner really prioritize his own family over the fate of Hungary's Jews? No one can say for sure. Some believe that it took the Hungarian Council weeks to translate and make copies of the report. By the time they did, it was already too late. This story might sound like a clear-cut case of right and wrong, but it's not that simple. Hindsight is 20/20, and the Hungarian Jewish Council simply had no good choices. There was no guarantee that mass panic would actually save lives. Plus, many older Jews simply didn't believe that such a horrible report could be true. But Walter's escape hadn't been for nothing. After the publication of his report, world powers began pressuring Hungary to end the deportations of Jews. The Spanish, Swiss, and Turkish governments, the Red Cross, even the Pope begged the Hungarian regent to stop the trains. British and American forces bombed Budapest, dropping leaflets warning that those responsible for the deportations would be punished. Finally, Hungary's leader caved, ending deportations on July 9th, 1944, just a few months after Walter's escape. Less than a year later, Germany finally surrendered. The Soviet army liberated Auschwitz, and Walter, now Rudolf, started picking up the pieces of his shattered life. He became a biochemist. He married a childhood friend and had 2 daughters with her. He testified at Nuremberg and watched as his report brought Nazi war criminals, including Adolf Eichmann, to justice. He moved around the world. He wrote a memoir. He maintained a wicked sense of humor, even as he testified against Holocaust deniers, only 40 years after his escape from the most systemized genocide in history. He'd done the impossible. He'd saved hundreds of thousands of Jews, brought war criminals to justice, and provided the kind of details that are still, sadly, necessary today in an age where it's becoming increasingly trendy to deny or downplay the Holocaust. Walter Rosenberg, or Rudolf Vrba, was a hero, and his story should be told far and wide.
Well, we have all vowed to never forget. We've also vowed that never again. But here in our lifetime, in our generation, we're seeing it again. We're seeing the same hatred, the same call for genocide against the Jews. And it's happening right on college campuses here in America, where I've got to say that it's out of ignorance, but they're calling from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, without even understanding what that means. It means the destruction of Israel and the murdering of every single Jew living there. That has been the avowed goal of Hamas, and they've said it again and again. They've said it in their charter. In the so-called peace negotiations, that they at the end of that, they said, we will never lay down our arms. It is absolutely impossible for us to agree to that. That means they want to struggle and continue to struggle until Israel is wiped off the map. It's the same ideology behind Hezbollah, the Popular Front, the PLO. All of them share that. And when are we going to wake up to it? We have plenty of Walters and Alfreds today telling the true report, but do we have enough world leaders saying, well, we understand the true report and we want to act on it? Let us pray that we have that, and we have that courage to stand up to the evil that is so prevalent and so obvious in our world today. We want to thank our friends at Unpacked for that wonderful video. Unpacked is a brand name, and it's under Open Door Media. Make sure to follow them on YouTube, Facebook, and all the social media platforms. And for more great content and to support their mission, go to unpacked.media. Well, Sophie was just a young girl during World War II. She was taken from her home and sent to Germany. Well, there, Nazi doctors tried to change her eye color. Well, today she's safe, living in Israel, and she's thankful for the love and support she's getting from you.
Sophie was born in Latvia the day World War II started. When her father, a Red Army officer, left for the front, Sophie's mother was taken prisoner.
The Nazi took all of the children back to Germany. Those that could pass off as German children were given to families to be raised as good Germans. I had dark hair, so I was taken to an orphanage. The Nazi conducted an experiment on us, trying to change our eye color.
At the end of the war, the Soviet army liberated the orphanage. Sophie was reunited with her mother, who had spent time at a concentration camp in Latvia.
It took years for my mother to find out what happened to my other siblings. Finally, she learned my brother and sister had made it to Israel, but we weren't allowed to leave the Soviet Union to join them.
Sophie and her mother finally made it to Israel in 1972. She later married and made a life for herself and her family.
I grew up without a childhood. So when I had my own children, I gave them everything I had been robbed of. I was so glad to be able to raise them in Israel.
When Sophie and her husband got older, he had to move into an assisted living facility while she was left at home to deal with her own health issues. Sophie was lonely and bills were piling up. So when CBN Israel found out about her, we started taking her food baskets.
You bring groceries, visit regularly, and spend time with me. And you never forget to call me on my birthday. I can feel that you truly care.
Thanks to the support of CBN Israel donors, Sophie knows she and other Holocaust survivors are not alone.
I am so happy for people like you who still remember me. There are not many of us left. It's great to know that you care.
It's one of the biggest things we can do for the Holocaust survivors, and they're still there in Israel, and they still need support. But that's just one of the outreaches from CBN Israel. We're providing for evacuees from the Gaza envelope in northern Israel. As northern Israel reopens, we're providing help for them to get reestablished. We're also helping the kibbutzes and the Gaza envelope rebuild, whether it's they need a kitchen or they need a supermarket or they need new bomb shelters. What is the need and how can we provide the need? And it's all made possible because people like you care enough to give. So if you want to be a part of CBN Israel, if you want to be a monthly partner, call us, 1-800-350-2230, or you can go to our website, cbn.com/supportisrael, or you can text Support Israel to 71777. Now, what are we asking for? We're asking for monthly support at $25 or more a month. And when you do that, we'll send out to us, out of Zion, a 16-month Holy Land calendar. That will be yours for a monthly gift of $25 or more. We also have a special promotion we're doing right now because we think the world needs prayer. So we will pray for you at the Western Wall. If you're already a supporter of CBN Israel, we've sent you a card where you can write down your prayer requests. When you send it back to us, we'll send it to Jerusalem so that our staff will be able to pray for them at the Western Wall. If you want to get involved in that and you're brand new to this, don't worry. Just write your prayer request down, mail it to us, and we'd be glad to pray for you at the Western Wall. So go to cbn.com/supportisrael or call that special number that's 1-800-350-2230. Yad Vashem is a memorial to the victims of the Holocaust. Its mission, tell the world what happened and prevent it from happening again. Well, Chris Mitchell brings us that story from Jerusalem.
Yad Vashem's name is coming from the book of Isaiah, the message that each of those people who perished during the Holocaust should be remembered.
The memorial traces the story from before World War II through the horrors of the Holocaust.
My mother was born in Germany. She grew up before Hitler came to power, but she witnessed what happened in Germany when Hitler came to power. As years moved forward, reality got worse and worse for the Jews.
Ben Yehuda lost many of his family in the Holocaust.
We cry for what happened to humanity, what happened to those who were created by the image of Lord.
Mass murder took place on an industrial scale at the hands of the Nazis.
How they took the decision to destroy lives. How they have decided that Jews are subhuman that have no right to exist.
6 million perished. Yet some stood with and saved Jews who are remembered at the Avenue of the Righteous among the nations.
Righteous among the nations are non-Jews who put their own life in risk in order to try and help Jews during the Holocaust. They were not bystanders. They didn't turn their back.
Yet Ben Yehuda says the lesson of the Holocaust is a lesson for today.
Wherever you see anti-Semitism or any other hatreds, please stand up.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Yad Vashem Memorial, Jerusalem.
That's a message for all of us. Wherever you see anti-Semitism, and it seems to be so rampant in the world today, the level of violence against Jews, right here in the United States, the FBI tracks hate crimes, and in particular, hate crimes that are based on religion. You know, I guess in the natural, you would think, okay, well, is that directed at Muslims for all the terror attacks? What is that directed at? And overwhelmingly, it's directed at Jewish people. It's directed at synagogues. And synagogues have to have extra preparations, extra security every time they meet, every time they gather together. This shouldn't happen in America, but it is. And it's happening throughout Europe. The rise of anti-Semitism is truly staggering to me. The rabbis say in every generation there arises a Haman. Well, let's arise and counter that and say, no, we were brought into the kingdom for such a time as this. We're going to stand with Israel. We're going to stand with the Jewish people. Here's a word from Isaiah. I will give them an everlasting name that will endure forever. For all of us here, God bless you, and we'll see you again.